105th day of Ukrainian resistance, Ukraine Media Center, and our next guest, Vasyl Bodnar, the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Ukraine to Turkey. Uh, Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Vasyl. And let's just get down to the point. There has been a meeting of Mevlut Cavusoglu, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey, and his Russian colleague Sergei Lavrov. What do we Ukrainians need to know and to realize on the basis of this meeting and its results? Well, thank you for the question. A very important, urgent situation. We are following it. The negotiations are over, and it's important for us that Turkey keeps uh, performing its mediation services and keeps holding negotiations with us and with Russia. Attention has been paid to unblocking of Ukrainian ports, and as we realize, we are speaking now only about agreement to negotiate, but there are no specific agreements as yet, and there can't be any agreements made without us. The Turkish side has got information from the Russian side as to its standpoint, and we are now waiting for some communication between the Ukrainian and the Turkish sides to find some points of consensus. As you know, with the mediation of the UN, the negotiations are ongoing to develop the ways to unblock our ports in the Black Sea. And the main reason is, of course, the blockade arranged by the Russian Federation, because they are trying to blame us. And of course, they cannot do this because they are the aggressor country and they have caused this crisis. But for many countries of the world, including Turkey and North Africa and many countries in Latin America, unblocking of our ports is a way to getting rid of being dependent on other markets and to reduce the price of bread, because a part of the world have been affected by Ukrainian grain not getting to the markets, to the global markets. That's why it's really important, and this is both in the interest of Ukraine and of Turkey to get this unblocking. The Russian side is trying to play its stupid games, trying to continue blockade, work with courts, try and impose some of their own suggestions, absurd suggestions. I'm sure they will not manage to do this. They have to unblock the ports, and only then we could tell about unmining and about the first of all, we need to ensure security of our ports and to ensure the good ways to bring the grain out. So far, I don't see any specific steps from the Russian Federation showing that they are ready to do this. And it is in their interest not to let our grain leave our ports. They want to sell as much of their own grain as they can and to steal as much of our grain in the occupied territory as possible. What about any other discussions, a discussion of the issues of possible negotiations processes? Have they been negotiated at this meeting? You know that Turkey is the only country of the world that has managed to set two sides of the conflict, the aggressor and the victim Ukraine, to the table of negotiations. And there has been certain progress achieved in the negotiation. We had an Istanbul meeting at the end of March, and there were some achievements. We were ready to keep working at those achievements to conclude some agreements, but we cannot trust the Russian Federation. We are urging all the other partners not to trust the Russian Federation, because Russia actually wasted all this. Instead of continuing the dialogue, it kept on its attack. Now Turkey is still trying to help with the negotiations. They are providing the platforms. They are ready to provide some more platforms for negotiations. And today's meeting aimed to find some points of contact for the negotiations to continue. What was said in public shows that they want the parties to communicate, and they see that there is possible room for negotiations, and they are ready to promote this, but no specific activities and steps are meant, because we need to understand what are the conditions set by each party, because our side sets the precondition that the troops should be taken out of the Ukrainian territory, and then we could conclude an agreement. And the theory of peace in exchange of the territories doesn't work, which is quite well understood by the Turkish side, though they are still trying to somehow help with finding out the standpoint of Russia and with restoration of the dialogue. Probably you have also seen in media that negotiations about Syria, in Libya, and Northern Caucasus have also been subject to these negotiations because the points of interaction and conflict between Turkey and Russia. These are the areas of confrontation of the interests of Turkey and Russia, and not everything is that smooth. In particular, you know that Turkey has announced a new military operation in the north of Syria, which of course has made Russia concerned, and one of the reasons for Lavrov's visit to Turkey goes about these plans of Turkey to have these military operations within the 30-kilometer area from their border. What about the general characteristics of the standpoint of Turkey and the Turkish people? What is their attitude to the war? It is pro-Ukrainian. Definitely, with some specific elements, this is not 100% the way we would like to see. Turkey has its own interests. It's a great regional power that is also trying to keep to its own standpoint and follow its own interests. We can see this in terms of regional safety and NATO. But definitely, both the government of Turkey and the Turkish people are on our side. First of all, they do understand how unjust the war is. There have been polls, and 78% consider this war unjust, the one violating our sovereignty, being a brutal war of invasion, and having such classical Muslim values. The Turkish society is always in favor on the side of the one who is a victim. Um, this is both in terms of practical support and psychological assistance. And we have seen lots of Turkish assistance because our embassy for about a month and a half was getting a lot of assistance, humanitarian assistance from Turkey, from Turkish people. They just took their own watches, their own golden items to buy some drugs, to buy some food for Ukrainians. And most people already know what glory to Ukraine means, what Slava Ukraini means, and most of them show their solidarity in social media. Of course, there are some sensitive points, and we need to understand what these points are, not to run into certain conflicts. For example, the most sensitive element is the element of criticism. If we want to criticize Turkey for certain actions, for example, for having a dialogue with Russia or still having some cooperation with Russia or tourists, we need to realize that um, our arguments will not work here in spite of the war. The moods in Turkey are anti-Western moods, and they have been there for the last decades. For us, it is manifested in the explanation of the reasons of the war, because a lot of Turkish respondents think that the war resulted from NATO and the US. I mean that the reason for the war was NATO. Of course, this has nothing to do with us. It's not does not refer to Ukrainian foreign policy, but it shows the spectacles and the prisms through which the Turkish society is looking at the events, in particular events in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, and let alone that everybody knows what is flying in our sky, and well, one of the symbols of our victory is Bayraktar. And what is Bayraktar for Turkey? And maybe if you could tell a couple more words about cooperation of Ukraine and Turkey in terms of the military defense complex. Well, I know a lot, but I will not tell you anything. This is confidential information. The only thing I can tell you is something that is really happening. Well, Baykar Makina is the real title. A company headed by two brothers with the surname Bayraktar from the Black Sea region, from the same name inhabited settlement, and their father founded this company at some point of time, and they were dealing with drones, and now their product line includes Bayraktar, which Ukrainian army has, and we concluded contracts several years ago. That's why we had procurement for a certain period of time. The company has developed a very promising new two-engine drone, a man-flying object called a Pinji, which is a host rider, and it has motor siege engines from Ukraine. Also, they are developing a promising drone fighter, which will also have the Ukrainian engine, and this is a very important story of our cooperation. There are some other achievements which are rather promising, and probably you also remember that before the war, on the 3rd of February, we signed an agreement on launching a Bayraktar production site in Ukraine. So we expect that the plant will be constructed and that those manned flying objects will start being produced in our territory, which will mean closer cooperation and interaction. And here it is really important that Ukraine has some theoretical developments which could result in the components not just for drones but for a lot of other things. And this is one of the bases of, for our close cooperation. And probably last week you also saw some public communication saying that in response to collection of money by the Lithuanian society, the Lithuanian community, company Bayraktar Machina presented to Lithuania one unmanned flying object that will be one drone that will be given to the army of Ukraine, and the money um, will be given for humanitarian assistance. So this is a good manifestation of the attitude to Ukraine, because this is not only about some pure humanitarian aid, but also some complex flying objects. And the last question, what about Ukrainian refugees in Turkey? How many did they have and how many do they have now? What is the dynamics and what are the terms of their stay? Well, in fact, there are no Ukrainian refugees in Turkey. There are Ukrainian citizens there who have come as ordinary citizens, definitely fleeing from the war, but they have not got the status of refugee because they didn't want to register the documents for this, and mostly they just apply for the international protection certificate, some of them, and some of them for temporary residence permit. And mostly these are people who have high income, because in Turkey there are no legal grounds to provide assistance to refugees from Ukraine, and therefore these people mainly live there at their own cost. And the other point is that there is, well, as far as figures are concerned, about 165,000 Ukrainian citizens have gone to Turkey, and now about 55,000 are still staying in Turkey, mainly close to Antalya, Istanbul, and Ankara, and also in some other places where uh, they could find some relatives or some places of stay. We know that uh, Turkish citizens normally have large families, and mainly these are mothers and children who were evacuated from Ukraine. Also, some mothers who managed to fly to take a plane to Turkey or somehow to leave the country, and some of Crimean Tatars and Ossetians who also from the Crimea who also went there from the south of Ukraine. And also we have orphans from the Dnipropetrovsk region, and thanks to local authorities and one of our businessmen, we have managed to evacuate about 9 groups of such people, such children, orphans. They are staying close to Antalya in a hotel complex, and they are staying here on a temporary basis, and after the end of the war, they're going to get back. Also, citizens are moving, some are ready to go back, and we're also helping them with consular services, and we are trying to help them with flights. And the groups of children evacuated to Turkey were also provided with accompaniment by adults. And now we are also trying to support them with humanitarian aid. We have different educational events. And in Ankara, for example, they have organized a school, a 3-day school, where they have full-fledged classes. And it's rather difficult to establish a Ukrainian school. That's why it does have the status of school. It has the status of courses. But anyway, it helps. And we also publish different books, have different events with Ukrainian students. And we are trying to work with the groups of students who cannot have their studies in Ukraine. And we are trying to help them study here for the meantime. So let's express our gratitude to the embassy for this highly important work you're doing. This is Vasyl Bodnar, Ambassador Extraordinary in Plenipotentiary of Ukraine to Turkey. We have been talking about important events, important news, in particular about the meeting of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov. Our media center will continue its work.